Our next topical area is really return on investment. Now let me ask you this question. If somebody came to you and said, look, give me some money, and for that money, and then your question is, well, why do you want that money? He says, well, I'm going to do something with it. You say, well, what are you going to do with it? He says, well, I don't know, but it'll be good. It sounds like a kind of an odd conversation, but when you're in business, when you put this financial hat on, when you're going to take money out of your pocket, and actually an organization is going to do this for your project or for anything else, if they're going to invest time, energy, money, they're going to want some level of return back. So you put money in a bank, whether it's a savings account, you put it in the stock market, you expect some kind of return. Okay? Now, so that's this return on investment is really, that's the principle. And I will tell you, this can get very complicated very quickly. And like I've been doing through this whole series, and I'm going to give you some very simple examples, just some thoughts. But I'm also going to talk to you about a resource here. So there's a couple of books that I think are going to be very, very important for you to at least check out. And these are books by a gentleman by the name of Jack Phillips and his wife Patricia Phillips. It's Making Capital and Analytics Work, and Bottom Line on ROI. These are two very good resources that really will take this topic to a lot more in depth than what I'm going to give you. But I'm going to give you some foundational principles here. Now the thing about return on investment, I'm going to give you an equation, but I'm going to do this in the form of a problem. So we're going to walk through a typical story. So, and this may be one of your stories. So let's just say, for example, an organization is experiencing turnover, pretty high turnover, 82% for our CSRs. So this is our customer service representatives. So pretty high turnover, but actually not an unrealistic turnover in some organizations for that group of employees. Now let's just say that our annual turnover costs turn out to be $600,000. Not an unrealistic number. And those turnover costs are everything. You just think holistically. It's cost of recruiting and training and just sort of lost, perhaps lost business. But we've done some level of calculation, and we know that that turnover really creates a cost to the organization. Now, we've done some investigation on here. We've put our investigative hat on, and we say that there's going to be an intervention here. We're actually going to intervene and say, we think part of the issue is at least in that we can solve, we can reduce, we can address this turnover by training. So you say, oh, that sounds like a good thing. But then we have to think about the cost of that training. The cost of this intervention, this training, happens to be $50,000. So we're going to make an investment in training in order to try to get this 82% turnover down. Now, let's just say that we've done this. We've sort of drawn a line, and the organization said, hey, go for it. Now, after a period of time, we look, the new turnover cost is now $300,000. Wow, we're like knocking it out of the park. I mean, we're killing it, right? For $50,000, we've reduced our turnover costs from $600,000 down to $300,000. So now we want to think about what's that return on investment. So what we have to do is we look at our net improvement benefit is really $250,000 because we invested $50,000. So it really isn't $300, it's $250. Now the way this works, the basic equation is that you take your benefits, subtract out your cost, and then you divide it by your cost. So in this case, our benefit was $300,000. Our cost was $50,000. Then we had, so that gives us our $250,000. And then we divide it by our $50,000. And when we do that, we get a cost to benefit ratio really of 5 to 1. Now you can put this in a percentage, and it's something like 500%. So you could do it either way. But what it is that we're taking for $50,000, what's our return on that investment? Well, actually 5 times. I mean, it's significant. So you want to think about some organizations want a pro forma, which means like, hey, give me this ahead of time. Give me the reasons for me to give you $50,000. We're doing this somewhat in retrospect, but it could be either a look forward and certainly a look back. And you probably want to do both of those things. You want to, in order to get the money, you need to say this is what our potential is, and then look back to see whether you've achieved it. Now, the last thing I want to say is that when it comes to some HR projects, some of these things are really, really hard to quantify. And the book really talks about that. So while it's easy to put a framework together, sometimes how do you put a value of the benefit on employee engagement? How do you value and increase morale? So I will tell you that it's hard. As best you can, maybe perhaps through this class, we can discuss how you can actually quantify those things that are not so quantifiable. But there's a point where it's just like, hey, we think this is the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do. And it may not have a direct, sort of a cogs effect, it may have an indirect effect. But nonetheless, this is something that's